You step barefoot on wet planks, still cold from the night. Someone passes dried fish, and you chew slowly, the salt sharp on your tongue. In moments, the drumbeat will begin, and the overseer's voice will call you to the oar. This day will not rise in glory, but in rhythm, the same rhythm that will carry you through hunger, work, and small comforts until night closes in again. Along the way, the crew will show you quiet tricks of survival, the little habits that make harsh water feel almost like home. And now the first breath of morning waits. If you find these quiet journeys through the past a good companion for rest, you're always welcome to subscribe and join me for more gentle history nights. And I'd love to hear in the comments where you imagine closing your eyes, whether it's on the deck of a longship, beneath the stars of Egypt, or in some small forgotten corner of history that brings you peace. Dawn on the longship comes quietly, thin light washing across damp planks as the sea rocks you awake. The wool that kept your body through the night clings heavy with moisture, and the air carries the sting of salt. Around you, shapes shift and stir, men rising slowly, pulling cloaks tighter against the bite of morning. Breath drifts pale in the chill, but voices stay low. Dawn carries its own weight, and the crew meets it in silence. The oars wait, their long handles edged by faint glimmers of light. Yet before they move, there is the small act that starts every day, the morning meal. Someone passes a strip of fish into your hand. It breaks sharply between your teeth, the salt forceful at first before softening as you chew. This is a taste you know as well as the rhythm of waves against the hull. No one eats alone here. Hands reach out to share. Pieces of fish passed from one to another. So even the weary men who wake late are fed. The food itself is meagre comfort, but the giving of it turns the moment warmer than its salt and hardness suggest. A clay cup follows, pressed warm into your cold fingers. Inside is thin broth, barely more than barley rinsed through water, yet its steam rises gently through the dawn air. You sip, and the warmth lingers longer than the flavour, though a faint trace of herbs flickers at the edge of memory. The cup is passed on carefully, returned to the hands that hold steady against the ship's sway. There is no telling how often hot meals were served. Some crews managed a small brazier or cauldron lashed tightly against the timbers so it would not spill, though historians still debate how often fire was used at sea. Iron cauldrons did travel aboard though, tied down carefully. That detail alone explains how mornings like this could bring broth across moving waters. Whatever its source, the warmth spreads through you and eases the ache of waking. For a short while, the deck feels less like bare wood and more like a table others once sat around on land. The hunger doesn't vanish. You never expect it to. But here, hunger is eased by the rhythm of eating together. The salt on your tongue, the faint heat of broth, the sound of chewing and swallowing, all of it blends into the ordinary harmony of morning. As faces lift and eyes sharpen, the stillness begins to shift. Men stretch their shoulders, rub their wrists, and cough into the cold. Slowly, the ship itself seems as if it wakes alongside you. Light climbs steadily, a pale glow brushing across the sea. Clouds stretch low to the horizon, and the first streak of colour casts itself in brief ribbons before fading into grey. A gull's cry cuts through the air, carried as a faint trace across the waves. These details root the morning, not grand banners or signals from land, only small signs stitched into the sky and water. They remind you that each day begins first with simplicity, what you can see, what you can taste, what you hold close in the hand. Rope slides softly against wood, reminding you of the work soon to follow. Some men roll their shoulders, their fingers already forming the grip they will need for the oar handles. The overseer watches from near the mast, quiet, his eyes scanning the crew. You feel the ship's planks hum faintly under you. It is the hush before the call, the quiet that is not true silence, but a waiting that holds tension in it. The broth cup is emptied, the last taste passing your lips. You set it aside, knowing the moment stretches to its end. Around you, a few younger men hold themselves straighter, their earlier hesitation replaced with steadiness. Each passing of food and warmth gave more than just relief, it gave strength. Even the tired faces gained some firmness in the jaw, some readiness to meet what comes. The act of eating binds you together, pulling men from the echo of sleep into the shared posture of duty. The wind gusts briefly across the deck, sharp enough to sting your nose. It flaps at cloaks and makes the sail whisper overhead, though the fabric hangs loose for now. The mast moans when the ship shifts. The sound of water against the hull falls into an even rhythm. It is in that sound that every man feels the hours ahead pressing close, steady pulls, sweat, and voices blending as part of the ship's beat. Morning points forward, always. The Longship does not wait, it only demands. You tighten your cloak and rise with the others, knees stiff from sleeping on hard planks. Each stretch brings relief, each motion a reminder of how the night pressed on joints and bones. The oars lean upright along the dagger boards, tall, heavy, waiting like shadows against the sun. You eye their weight and know what it will mean. The Longship is ready to breathe again, its rhythm only moments from beginning. Morning here is not brightness bursting wide, but steady survival. It is dried fish breaking clean between your teeth, butter scraped from a cloth, broth sipped and shared with care. It is men shifting slowly, passing cups, setting scraps aside so nothing goes to waste. The day unfolds as carefully as breath, each act anchoring you a little more firmly to the work ahead. When scraps are packed, hands harden into fists and stretch into grips once more. The silence is no longer heavy but waiting, stretched like a rope about to draw tight. The planks underfoot echo faintly, with boots finding their place. Across that stillness, you can almost feel the air sharpen, as if the next sound will slice through everything. You steady your breath. The quiet is poised to break. The overseer's voice cuts across the deck, sharp and commanding. The quiet of morning vanishes. You take hold of the oar beside you, its rough grain smoothed where generations of hands have worked it before. The wood is solid, heavier than it first appears, and warmer than the planks under your bare feet. You lean forward, resting the blade against the edge of the sea, waiting for the signal. Around you, every man does the same. No sound, only the poised weight of bodies ready. The order comes again. Row. Oars dip as one, pulling downward in a sudden rush that splits the stillness in two. The shaft pushes back, forcing into your arms with all the resistance of the water. Shoulders tighten, muscles strain, and the ship shudders forward under the force. Cold spray leaps against your legs as the blade lifts and falls again. Beside you, bodies lurch and sway in time, rows of motion, folding forward and back in steady arcs. The sound builds, the churn of water, the rub of wood against iron fittings, and the deep rhythm of men breathing in unison. The morning is gone. Now the day belongs to the oars. Wood creaks under pressure, collars grind, and the ship hums with effort. The bite of salt reaches your lips as you crack them open for breath. Already your hands ache against the grip, the skin tender, where the rough handle eats into it. Still, there is no release. Each stroke matters. If one falters, the weight shifts to another. If the rhythm breaks, the ship stumbles. Here your body's not your own. It moves with everyone else. The ache builds quickly. Shoulders burn, forearms pull tight. Lower back stiffens. But soon those sharp edges of pain blur together into something constant. No longer burning, no longer distinct. You and the others become one motion, one breath pressed hard through clenched teeth. The effort itself speaks louder than words. This is not a hall, nor even a battlefield. This is a tighter bond. Rope ties sail to mast, but the oars tie men to one another. Behind your bench another row waits, cloaks drawn close. They sip from water skins, hands flexing as they measure the rhythm and count the strokes. Their turn will come soon enough, and they watch, knowing rest is always brief. As rowers trade places, the cycle never stops, keeping the ship moving as if the sea itself demanded no pause. Viking crews often divided labour into shifts or watches, so the ship could keep forward through day and night. It was through this rotation that a vessel could cover long stretches of coast. Contemporary sources and reconstructions suggest that in the best conditions, with strong crews and fair seas, these ships might travel extraordinary distances, sometimes close to 100 miles in a single day. Such feats were rare, but possible when discipline, manpower and weather aligned. The soundscape of the deck deepens with every pull. Sweat soaks through tunics, drops falling onto planks slick with salt and dampness. The overseer's voice rises above it all, pacing to keep the rhythm firm. At times he slaps his palm against the mast, sharp, steady beats that pierce the noise of work and hold time when fatigue threatens to unravel it. Rules were strict here, but not always the same from one ship to the next. Some sagas mention lashings or harsh words, others fines or punishing tasks. Discipline was clear, but how it was carried out varied. Strictness was necessary, for without it the ship itself would falter. Now and then a low voice begins a chant. It is not melodic, not meant to please the ear. It is practical, half prayer, half rhythm, measured words repeating in time to steady arms and keep the blades rising together. Sometimes others join, weaving their voices between breaths, turning strain into something almost bearable. The chant surges and fades, not constant, but always waiting to return in the moments when sweat and muscle begin to falter. Your tunic clings wet against skin, the wool heavy with both seawater and sweat. The sun rises higher, but here in the movement you barely notice, except where light flashes against the crests of water. Your hands grip against the oarlock, your muscles whisper rebellion, but nothing breaks the pace. The body may resist, but the ship insists. The rhythm is the heartbeat around you. It cannot be missed. Without it, the hull would drift lifeless. With it, the ship becomes something alive, gliding over the sea with speed that even windless days cannot deny. The shape of the longship itself rewards the pain. Its narrow draught holds lightly on the waves, each stroke carrying it forward with more ease than its heavy build suggests. The wood and iron that make its frame may seem simple, but in motion it becomes more than timber. It becomes an extension of labour, a vessel of endurance, able to skim through shallow rivers or wide seas alike. You feel that design with each pull, resistance lessened, momentum carried, the vessel rising toward its purpose. The hours are difficult to measure, rows of strokes merge, Sounds collapse into one another until you no longer hear individuals, only the whole, oars slapping water in arcs, shafts shuddering in their locks, breaths punched and drawn in rhythm. Time narrows. Your body aches, but the ache dulls. Your arms move, whether you will them to or not. This is what life aboard becomes. The separation between self and ship grows thin, until the difference barely matters. Eventually, the call comes to switch. You release the oar with trembling fingers, your grip fighting to stay even as your body longs to loosen. Another man steps in at once, shoulders ready to take the burden, and the transition is seamless. You slump back, draw a swallow from a water skin, breath ragged between lips. Rest is only partial. Even seated with a cloak over your back, your mind continues in step, hearing oars hit water in a rhythm too deep to silence. The overseer remains steady, watchful. Order does not lapse. New rowers bend forward. Wood dips, the ship lunges. The deck creaks beneath them as though the rhythm itself erases whoever takes the bench. Your heart still hammers in the same beat, too sunken into the body to stop simply because your hands have let go. Light glints on the sea, brighter now, bouncing harshly into your eyes. Sweat dries cool on skin, while fresh beads replace it. The morning has passed, though you have felt it only in strokes and rhythm. Hunger creeps at the edges of your mind again, sharp, waiting. Soon the benches will trade places not only for work but for food. As the longship presses forward into the strengthening light, the thought of eating begins to matter as much as the steady swing of the oars. The sun rises higher, sharp and unyielding, and by midday its glare presses against every surface of the ship. The sea itself glitters with a heat that burns the eyes if you stare too long. With no shade to soften it, no trees, no roof, only the endless sky open above. The brightness feels like a weight. Sweat gathers quickly, stinging where oar handles have rubbed the skin raw, and the planks under your feet grow hot enough to scorch. The air holds both salt and warmth, a mix that dries your throat and draws the last coolness from your body. Work continues, but the strain now is heavier. Not just in muscle, but everywhere hunger makes itself known. Each stroke of the oar lands harder on exhausted arms. Backs curve forward, shoulders tighten, and still the pace holds steady. Around you, men breathe deep and fast, their shirts darkened with sweat and spray. The smell of sun-heated tar rises sharply from the seams of the deck, and gulls trail in the sky overhead, wheeling and crying as if mocking your tethered labour. The repetition has no end. Bend, pull, push, rise, while the hunger coils tighter in your belly. Work may be demanded, but food has its own command. The hours stretch thin. Every sound becomes louder under the heat. The crack of wood in its fittings, the slap of water against blades, the grind of sweat-slicked hands shifting along the oar handles. The sail hangs slack, giving no aid, so the crew pulls every mile by muscle alone. Rhythms hold because they must. If one weakens, another carries the weight, but only for so long. By midday you measure time not as you did at dawn, but solely in breaths drawn before the overseer calls for pause. When he does, silence rushes like relief. The overseer's hand signals toward the dark iron cauldron lashed into its brace, suspended between supports so it cannot tip. Its shape is blackened with age, soot lining its edges, yet still sturdy for what is needed. Flames are not stoked openly on the deck. Instead, smouldering coals, nursed in a clay box, are drawn beneath it. A low hiss rises as water meets heat, and already the smell of broth shifts across the air, faint yet promising. Pieces of dried meat soften as they drop into the water. Barley scatters across the surface and sinks, clumping gently before breaking apart in the swirl. Bits of herbs, pulled from small store sacks tied away, vanish into the boil, leaving little more than their aroma to mark them. The scent spreading through the warm air is simple. Smoked meat, grain, salt. But to men hollow from hours of rowing, it feels like richness. Faces that moments ago bent forward under fatigue now tilt toward the pot, each man breathing deeper to catch that weight of comfort. Stores for such voyages were chosen for endurance, not delight. Grain, flatbreads, and coarse flour formed part of the cargo, but they were heavy and could sour too quickly at sea. Dried fish, salted meats, hardtack, and barrels of ale or water remained more secure. These filled bellies day after day when nothing else could. Yet now and then someone reached into a pouch, produced a few saved nuts, or pried open a cloth bag with a treasure inside. On this day, crushed hazelnuts fall into the broth, giving off a faint crackle of oil that spreads in bright film across the water's top. The pot's smell deepens noticeably, and in that moment, the ship feels less barren. Men recognize what such a small gift means. Rare as they were, simple treats gave more than nutrition. They lifted hunger into something almost like joy. Bowls appear in practiced hands, wooden and battered, and they're filled one after another without waste. The routine is steady. Ladle dipped, broth settling, passed down, another ready. You cradle yours carefully, the warmth folding through your palms. The broth is thin, not a feast but the salt of softened meat, and the grains weight against your tongue, deliver enough to feel whole again. Then there, the crunch of nut against your bite, a taste unexpected, sweet amid fatigue. Your lips curve without thinking, and someone nearby notices, chuckling in recognition of the same gift. It spreads quickly, ripples of low laughter, on a deck that only hours before had echoed only with strain. The food fills little more than half your need, but where it does not ease hunger, it stirs a different strength. For a time, shoulders lower, eyes soften, and weariness balances against quiet content. Voices rise short and unpolished, as one man mutters a joke about the broth being thin enough to see a fish swimming straight through it. Another snorts at this, flicking a husk of barley from his bowl toward him. Laughter follows, brief but real, before silence folds the crew back into softer moods. The ship has no courts or halls, no banners overhead, but here on bare planks, men find the smallest of bonds rooted in broth and shared fatigue. Water skins pass one hand to another. The drink inside is brackish, carried long since from land, but enough to coat the throat left rough from heat and salt. Each man drinks, lips touch to leather rim, then sends it wordlessly along. The ocean slaps against the hull. For a moment all sound is eased, narrowed to slurps, sighs, and the low scrape of bowls being pushed empty. The belly remains restless, but not as before. Hunger now seems less urgent, manageable, set at bay by fire and grain. This act repeats itself day after day, essential as the rowing itself. Stew like this is not made for memory, but for movement. Yet each time the pot gave more than just food. It gave a signal that life still carried on with order and care. The meal ends soon enough. Bowls are rinsed in salt water and stacked. Stray grains are brushed from planks to keep rot and vermin at bay. The overseer stands watchful, his hand resting against the mast. Beneath, the men move with slower motions, those still within the habits carved by need. Some pull cloaks tighter against bare shoulders, protecting skin from glare. Others lean back, breathing slower while their short rest lingers. Above, however, the sun shows no mercy. It climbs yet higher, pressing heat down without pause, and what freshness the broth brought burns quickly from flushed skin. Sweat returns, eyes squint as silvery water blinds them, and the horizon shimmers, empty but vast. Slowly, the oars will be lifted again, the rhythm resumed, the silence broken by command. Yet for now, there is only waiting, the pause stretched between hunger eased and labour renewed. Then, as you raise your head, the horizon's colour shifts. Against the brightness, clouds take shape, faint marks smearing across the pale line where sky meets water. They thicken while you watch, grey pressing slowly toward the longship's path. The warmth within your stomach steadies you, though what lies ahead draws something heavier into the chest. The stillness holds, but every man can feel it balanced with something gathering beyond reach. The sea does not remain calm forever. A sudden roar of wind lifts the sail, tearing through the steady rhythm of the day. The planks beneath you shift until balance feels uncertain, the longship jolting to the will of the sea. Air grows heavy, pressed with force, and the square sail strains overhead. It no longer billows in measured pulses, but lashes wildly, a beast caught in its ropes. Viking sails were made of thick, woven wool, often steeped in fat or resin to resist water, yet even this weight groans under the storm's pull. The ropes snap taut and shiver, and every man knows the calm has broken. The first waves strike without pause. One hammers against the hull so hard your shoulder slams into a beam as you scramble to steady yourself. Spray drenches you in a rush colder than any sweat, sinking through wool as if the sea itself had leapt aboard. Rain follows sharp behind it, thin needles at first, then whole sheets that erase the horizon, sky and water blurring into grey. Overhead every drop smacks the sail with a sound like hammering fists. Canvas pulls and groans, heavy with water, stretched thin against its seams. The deck turns slick within moments. Men race to catch flailing lines, sliding in their rush, waves dragging hard across their legs. Ropes lash and recoil like whips in the hands of the storm. The smell changes too. Tar, once warmed by the sun, is now swallowed under the stench of salt water and wet wool. The air raw with storm water clinging to every seam. You crouch low, clutching the railing, legs bent as the ship heaves and jerks. Each tilt of hull against wave rattles the beams, and the boat beneath you feels less like a vessel made by men, and more like a groaning frame clenched against breaking apart. Above, two figures climb hard into the rigging. Their feet scrabble across dripping beams as they clutch needles long as daggers and rope soaked in pitch. Sagging against the mast, they set broken cloth between their bodies and the rain and begin stitching where the wool has torn. Sagas describe such daring repairs. Some crews climbed aloft, even in weather such as this, though practices likely differed from ship to ship. Watching, you feel the storm erase their outlines with every spray, then reveal them again, dripping and battered, yet still pushing needles through the soaked weave. It seems impossible, but stitch by stitch they drag thread tight across fabric that should be unfixable in such winds. Thunder growls low, a sound that rolls through your bones and chest. Lightning arcs white and jagged above, blinding for a heartbeat. Faces flash pale around you, eyes wide, mouths open, but lost under the roar of canvas and wave. Orders are shouted, but few reach far. Instead, men copy one another, seizing ropes or shifting ballast, trusting the closest motion more than any voice, swallowed by the storm's roar. Rain no longer falls straight. It tears sideways, flung hard across the deck. It slaps your cheek, needle sharp, until skin burns. Every surface is waterlogged, cloak plastered heavy against your back. Hands slippery on soaked line, wool darkened until its smell of grease and lanolin rises sharp. You press into it, but no warmth stirs, only the numb weight of cloth sodden and cold. Around the mast, clustered groups argue through clenched teeth. Should the sail drop now, before the storm rips it fully free, or better to trim it, keep part harnessed for control? Scholars still debate what Viking captains chose. Sagas suggest some shortened their sails to ride the wind with care, while others lowered canvas altogether, trusting oars and seamanship to steer them through. Here within the storm, certainty breaks apart into fragments. You see pointing hands, you hear straining voices, but all vanish beneath the surf of wind and wave. In your own hands, the rope cuts into wet palms, swelling and raw, slicing sharp lines where you cling. If the line bursts, the last restraint against chaos vanishes. Beside your shoulder, water streams off charms tied into the rigging, carved wood, lengths of bone wrapped in faded thread, small knots bound with cloth. Their shapes bang rhythmically against the mast. One sailor presses cold lips to his fingers, lifts them to a talisman, then spits into the rain. Another leans forehead to a carved pendant, closing eyes in brief prayer. Against the storm's scream, such actions seem too small to hold meaning. Yet in that instant, while everything else feels beyond hand or will, these gestures steady more than rope. Above the men still mend, bodies pressed hard to staves. Bolts of lightning split across their movements, etching them in white, then vanishing them into blackness. Yet their needles bite through despite sway and spray. Crude, wet thread, clenched with stone-hard hands, dragged across slits in heavy cloth. You watch and feel the ship's whole weight measured in those motions. If the sail bursts apart, you know the vessel loses what strength remains. Two men and their threads become the fragile hinge between ship and drift. Time slips out of reach. The ship tilts, crashes, levels, only to tilt again. You grip until every finger aches, skin rubbed raw from swollen rope. The pounding in your jaw tells you how hard you grind your teeth. Above, rain hisses against patched cloth. Through all the collapse of sound, you hear faint clicks of needles sliding through threads, a softer rhythm, yet it endures. That sound becomes the balance to your fear, reminding you that not everything gives way. Wind tapers, almost unnoticed at first. The gusts stretch wider, less sharp. Rain still drives down, but its fists soften into sheets. Cries of men now reach farther. You hear more than see their movements. Slowly, sprayed beams reveal sails stitched and clumsy, yet whole. Each line tight, darkened, but unbroken. The cloth no longer lashes like a wild beast, but strains in steady groans, calmer against its ropes. The ship rights itself into long rolling arcs, heavy but survivable. Men collapse where they stand. One slides to the ground, with back slammed against a beam, chin to chest. Another grips his knees, coughing salt water into his lap. There are no cheers. No one has the strength for pride. Relief comes instead, deep as breath filling a hollow chest. Gratitude without words, felt in the glance of one man to another, each hearing the beat of heart still alive within. The storm lingers as a shadow rather than fury. Grey skies remain, the sea still rough. Rain trickles steadily, no longer sharp but insistent. Ropes hang slack, sagging like tired limbs, sails heavy yet secure. You study your palms red with swollen lines, rope burns stinging, even as rain rinses it clean. It hurts, but pain itself proves survival. Around you, men sit silent, breath shallow. They lean upon each other not out of choice but need, heads bowed where space permits. Wet cloaks drag over the planks, water pooling below. Every bone aches. Yet beyond exhaustion, another kind of still settles. The storm has broken, and what remains is quieter than silence, gentler than calm. It feels as though even the sea exhales. In that hush, you notice the cold pressing harder beneath the wet. It seeps through wool and into the bones, deeper than hunger, more persistent than pain. Some draw a cloak across their shoulders, some tuck closer to their neighbour's side, all seeking to resist it in their own way. The wind carries nothing gentle with it, only chill. The quiet now is not victory, only this. The awareness that against storm or stillness alike, cold is constant, and it waits with patience. The night settles damp across the ship, and cold presses close, sharper now than hunger or any storm's aftershock. You draw your cloak forward, its wool darkened and heavy with spray. Every seam feels clammy, yet the cloth still gives some resistance, carrying the faint waxy scent of lanolin, a reminder that though imperfect, this wool was made to protect. Sailors knew a single cloak was rarely enough. Many layered tunics, pulled sheepskins across their backs, or wrapped furs at their feet. A wool could hold back much, but not everything. Warmth here is never taken for granted. It is crafted piece by piece, from cloth, from habit, from resourcefulness. The smell of that lanolin is strong, sharp in the nose, but it is a comfort too. It means the fabric holds some water out, even while dripping against your knees. Each inhaled breath tastes of grease and salt, smoke lingering from coals used earlier to soften meat. These smells weave themselves into the life of the ship. They are as steady a part of the voyage as the waves. In time, the scent ceases to repel and starts to steady you. It becomes the perfume of survival, known and oddly trusted. Beside you, a sailor leans forward and pulls something from under his cloak. At first, it looks like a stone, plain, dark, small enough to fit in a palm, until you remember. Hours ago, it lay beside warm coals, collecting heat. Now he slips it back under the wool, pressing against his ribs. No flame, no spark, but muscle and cloth warm slowly around it, and his shoulders ease as if touched by comfort few of you have felt all day. You study the trick, simple and clever, a reminder that warmth is not only offered by thick furs or open fire, but by whatever the crew can make serve. One stone carried close is enough to turn raw cold into something bearable. Others choose the warmth of company. Near the mast, men sit shoulder to shoulder, cloaks overlapping until they form one damp, heavy wall against the night. Breath mingles in small clouds, shared heat pooling where knees and arms touch. Voices here are soft, almost nothing, perhaps a tired joke, perhaps only the rhythm of steady breathing. But you feel something greater stir within it. The warmth is more than skin. It becomes reassurance, a quiet knowledge that no man holds out against the sea alone. In the hush of cold, closeness itself becomes as essential as oars or rope. You know other tricks. Some tuck heads deep into wool folds, some breathe into cupped hands, trapping steam against chilled skin. These are not cures for the cold, only replies. You have learned that no cloth, no matter how thick, shuts it out completely. Instead, you bend to it, carrying the chill without letting it break you. The body adjusts, the mind learns. Slowly, you discover that warmth is not only a thing kept or lost, but a craft maintained in motion. repeated with every layer pulled tight, every shoulder pressed close, every stone heated and passed on. Now and again, you catch the faint musk of sheepskins, fur soaked and clinging, but dense enough to keep pockets of heat inside. Toes push into their rough fleece, and while wet stink rises off them, no one cares. In each coil of damp hair, some measure of comfort lingers. Practicality outweighs finery here. What matters is not beauty, but the shield each ragged piece of hide can throw around a body. Observing the crew, you recognize the truth. Survival is pieced together, not given. Each scrap of cloth, each warmed stone, each huddle bent against the mast adds another layer against the sea's demand. As you hold your own cloak close, you feel breath gather within it. Exhaling slowly, you catch a thin warmth against your face, gone in moments, but better than nothing. You learn to stretch that moment, to fold it into the rhythm of endurance. One breath, then another, slow and deliberate. The ship teaches you that warmth can be coaxed, held briefly, released, then sought again. It is like rowing or mending rope, a skill of patience. The cold in time becomes a kind of teacher. It shows you borders, what the body can stand, and then it pulls those borders outward as new tricks form. At first you cursed it. Now you see its other lesson. By forcing men into closeness, it gives connection. By making wool and fur so heavy, it proves what careful craft can do against impossible odds. By demanding improvisation, it shows what can be achieved with so little. Cold is not something to chase away. It is something to manage, something to endure with skill. You rest your cheek against damp wool, greasy in scent, and no longer flinch from it. It feels known now, a companion more familiar than comfort from land. A hand brushes yours briefly in the huddle, and neither of you moves away. You understand the truth. Warmth rises not from grand fires, but from many small gestures gathered together. The sea tests you in storm and silence alike, but the one defence you always shape against is this: men carrying warmth, passing it, sharing it, making it from nothing but habit and will. The wind sighs through rigging, its whistle sharp against darkness. Stones cool in their turn, only to be warmed again, and slipped discreetly back beneath cloaks. Coarse wool scratches cheeks, damp fur presses knees. This repetition, like every rhythm of seafaring, is what steadies life against the vastness of the water. Warmth becomes craft, and in craft there is survival. Yet as you sit wrapped close, you notice other shapes around you. Knots tied into posts, small carvings or bits of cloth swaying lightly against the mast. Even here, in the night's chill, sailors reach out to brush them with their fingers, or bow heads toward them briefly. These objects do not give heat, but men treat them much the same, held close, shared quietly, carried always. You look once more at these faint rattling charms, and sense that another kind of warmth moves among the crew, unseen but no less needed. A carved charm swings from the rigging, wet and darkened by spray. A sailor touches it as he passes, his lips moving in a whisper you cannot hear. On a deck caught between silence and work, such motions seem small, yet they settle the air around them. Belief on the water shows itself like this, quiet gestures woven into the ship as much as rope or pitch. Here, faith is not a distant ceremony, but a part of daily survival, carried into the rhythm of sea and timber. The charms themselves are plain: a scrap of cloth, a carved spiral in wood, a feather tied to bone. None are fine, yet everyone is worn smooth at the edges, polished by repeated touch. When you press your own hand against the carved spiral, you feel the dent left by years of fingers tracing across it. Simple, but steady. To the maker, it is a shield, small against the vast sea, but dependable all the same. During calm, they almost vanish into the clutter of the ship. Ropes sway, cloaks hang, and the eye ignores them. But as soon as clouds thicken or cold creeps across the deck, gazes return. One man reaches briefly, another glances, and the act spreads, like a signal across the benches. Fear calls belief to the surface. In stillness, it lingers quietly. In danger, it rises clearly. When storms strike, no one divides prayer from labour. To steer straight is to keep eyes on the horizon, yes, but also to grip the charm tied at the mast. Rope, oar, and faith. Each tool fits into the other. Even when conditions soften, that lesson remains. The sacred and the practical are carried here side by side. Navigation itself reveals that blend. Stars guide when visible, as do the sun's angle, or the flight of birds and the lines of waves. Crews also watch for hints in cloud colour or driftwood. Scholars debate whether sunstones, transparent crystals that catch and polarize light, were widely used. Some finds and modern trials suggest they might have helped track the sun on cloudy days, though evidence leaves the answer open. Whether common or rare, rituals and small tools supported skill together, never in isolation. You hear voices over the rolling sea. One sailor mutters Thor's name, his hand cut in a brief line through the air. Another breathes softer, invoking Odin, the wanderer who traded sight for wisdom. A third whispers toward the water itself, words for the spirits imagined below. None of these prayers are raised in trumpet sound. All are kept close, almost pressed against the ears of those nearest. Out here, the shared wish is clear, strength enough to survive what shifts beneath and around. The effect carries through the crew in posture more than in words. Back straighten after a prayer, arms seal tighter around ropes. Faith is not only for an unseen God, it is carried between men. To see one sailor touch a carved bone, then spit over the side, is to be reminded that he claims strength for all. The gesture is quick, practiced, part of the ship's order. Actions like this are repeated so often they become instinct, laws of habit as binding as commands from the overseer. Rituals like the spit over the rail or a muttered name serve two purposes. They reach outward, yes, but they also draw inward, steadying the one who acts. They are not empty theatre. They work as practical and psychological craft, calming nerves, restoring rhythm, unifying effort. Out here, one extra breath free of panic may prove as valuable as oars in the water. The rain swallows the spit and rushes it away toward the sea, yet the act lingers in memory. These rituals stitch their meaning deep into the deck. They remind hands of motion, give the body something familiar, and in return, fear lessens. No miracle follows. Some men truly believe in divine judgment, others simply practice these habits because they bring steadiness. Either way, comfort is found. When the wind settles, the evidence of belief remains. Amulets drip then dry stiff in the air. Bones pale against dark mast beams. Cloth clings, dried hard by salt, until faded threads crack. Yet they are not removed. These objects hang as constant as water barrels or meal bowls. Faith outlasts the storm. Sailors touch them again, before work begins anew. Bow heads briefly before grasping oars, or tighten fingers around pouches tucked at the belt. Practice becomes as normal as eating bread or drinking from a skin. From the benches you notice how rituals fold themselves into rhythm. a whisper with a rope pull, a charm touched before hammering a nail into plank. These quiet acts do not slow labour. In truth, they lengthen it, extending the strength of many men joined. Without them, work would seem harder, breath shorter. With them, courage stays longer than hunger or cold would normally allow. Belief makes the ship one body. Nothing about it appears grand. Voices stay low, hands move lightly. No sailor boasts of it, and no crowd gathers to listen. Instead, belief exists in flickers, a charm brushed, a murmured word, a breath pressed into cloth. This smallness gives it weight. Its strength is not in volume, but in how little it needs to exist. It is unseen, yet the crew leans into it moment by moment. As light wanes, fatigue pulls faces downward. Cloaks sag heavily on shoulders. Rain has left skin pale and lips cracked. That is when voices emerge again, but not in secrecy. At first slow, like ripples, then stronger. Men begin speaking together in little groups. They recount fragments of a story, offer short prayers aloud, laugh at slips in the telling. Faith has steadied fear, and now the need is no longer only survival, but renewal. A different voice begins, carrying words outward instead of inward. Across the deck, crews shift close. Charms still sway above, but the space transforms. Where belief gave bond in storm and silence, spoken tales begin to draw it further, gathering each man into something larger than himself. You sense the next part of their ritual life emerging, not whispered to the gods alone, but carried between each sailor. The quiet gestures that steadied the ship open into the sound of voices rising, uniting the crew in rhythm beyond the pull of oars. And so, when labour stills for a while, the deck does not remain mute. Something stirs in the air, carried now not in secret charms, but in laughter, story, and shared rhythm. What begins soft grows stronger as men lean closer, as night presses in, and they seek warmth of another kind. The same space that carried ropes, charms, and whispered prayers now begins to carry voices more fully, lifting what belief has steadied, turning it into sound that can fill the ship. When labour fades and the ship grows quieter, something gentler rises in its place. Voices drift across the deck, lifted not by command but by choice. At first it is soft, like a low murmur along the benches, then fuller as men lean shoulder to shoulder. The steady creak of planks seems to change in tone, carrying the sound differently, as though the ship itself listens. Slowly it shifts into more than timber on water. In these moments, the ship becomes a hall. The first story comes without announcement. A sailor clears his throat, his voice roughened by salt spray, and tosses out the thread of a tale. He speaks of a king so proud that his crown lit up the sky. Another quickly interrupts to say it was no crown at all, only an iron pot worn upside down. Low, rolling laughter follows, easy and tired from the day, but rich with release. You watch the way the men smile, not only at the image, but at how these stories grow with each voice. Truth may drift, but it does not matter. Out here, truth can be heavy. Laughter keeps it light. Exaggerated tales follow close behind. One man gestures to the horizon, claiming a serpent larger than many ships once slid over the waves. He stretches his arms until his shoulders shake, swearing the beast circled an island and trapped sailors inside its coils. Younger men shift uneasily, as though the creature might rise from below at any moment. Older ones shake their heads, smiling faintly, but none speak to undo the story. The sea is wide enough for mystery, and a tale is allowed to carry more than fact when fear already waits, in the dark water. From heels and spoons, a rhythm grows beneath the voices. Someone strikes a bowl with a piece of wood. Another taps his boots against planks, and soon a rolling beat surrounds the gathering. It is not music shaped for halls of kings, but a steady ground for hoarse voices. They begin a chant, uneven at first, then stronger, as more join. Sagas fall into the spaces left by the day's silence. Heroes who wrestled with giants, gods whose choices bent the fate of men. Archaeological finds and saga texts tell us that such songs and stories were part of daily life, both at sea and on land, binding work and memory together, carrying values across generations. Here those old echoes settle over the ship and hold the crew close. One tale paints a sea, formed out of a giant skull. Another turns to a warrior, lost in ice, who found his courage in trickery as much as in strength. The words are bold, but the delivery is slow. Voices cracked with labour, steady rather than rousing. Boots and spoons keep the beat while chants climb and fall in waves, each man pushing a little more sound into the night. You notice the deck itself hums with it, not from the sea this time, but from the collective press of voices. It feels less like noise for passing time, and more like a makeshift shelter raised from sound itself. Between stories, teasing rises. Nicknames carry from one end of the benches to the other. A younger sailor who stumbled during the last storm is named Seagull, the laughter gentle rather than sharp, as if he might take flight at the next strong gust. Another earns Bear, teased for both his size and the groan of his snore. These names sting for only a moment before softening into quiet bonds. In the roughness of the sea, such joking is less insult than invitation, a way of saying you belong here with us. The laughter has a different feel now than it did at the stories. It is quieter, closer to a hum of relief. Jokes soften memory. They do not erase it. Where the storm once pressed fear down into silence, now humour presses it aside. Laughter cannot stop the sea, but without it, men would feel the silence sink too heavily on their backs. Each low chuckle is a rope tied against despair. As the beat of spoons continues, you feel the sound move deeper into the body. Feet stomp. Planks vibrate under your touch. The mast, tall and central, stands like a pillar in a hall. In this way, space is reshaped. Planks become flooring, the mast a beam. Sound the smoke trails upward into rafters. You sit within it and see each voice as a reminder of belonging, drawn across the deck with no less meaning than stone halls at home. Young eyes take all of this in. Wide and intent, they lean forward at sagas of spirits, or chuckle quickly at the weight of nicknames. They do not ask for explanation. The stories themselves carry their meanings. Courage is folded quietly into each word, laughter teaching a language of endurance as well as any command. The older men know what is being taught. No lecture is given, no warning spoken. Instead, the lesson passes gently, bone to bone, across rhythm and story. You notice how the mood softens as stories shift from gods and heroes towards smaller things. A man speaks of his hearth fire, smoke so thick his eyes watered each morning. Another remembers the sound of sheep in spring, wool thick in his hands. These are not sagas, they are details of the home. For a moment the ship folds around them warmly. The smell of damp wool remains real. The ache of shoulders does not fade, but the sound of familiar memory bends them lighter. You hear sighs among the group, quiet, unembarrassed, shared. As the voices stretch thinner, rhythm slows. Spoons settle, bowls are laid aside, and only murmurs remain. Songs do not break off with a shout. They fade like smoke trailing off into the air. Cloaks shift back over shoulders. A cough rises here. A yawn stretches there. You realize the ship is quieting again, though differently now. The silence at last eases against you because it carries something inside it. Layers of sound and story settled like embers. The ship remains a hall, not in stone or timber, but in the way voices linger, even after they end. Above, the sky changes. Thin stars push slowly through where the cloud has pulled apart. The mast rises tall against them, a darker shape set against faint points of light. Men lean or lie back, heads lowering into cloaks, bodies pressed side to side. The hall slowly dissolves, and yet warmth remains, not in the air, but in the memory left by voices just spoken. The deck feels less empty than before, filled by the presence of story. The planks cool while you settle, and the hush of night grows wider. Your back finds the rough wood. Your shoulders brush against others nearby. Space closes tight again, yet the hall lingers in your mind, steady as lantern flame. Around you, laughter dwindles into a murmur, voices faint as tired breath. Soon the noise of the day recedes, and the ship becomes less a gathering place than a kind of long, narrow bed, holding every sound within it. The sagas and songs have given what they could, leaving you with their rhythm still faint in your ear. Now the deck stills. Above, the sky presses open, wider than the sea itself. One by one, men shift into rest, making what shelter they can out of worn wool and shared closeness. Their voices blend with the creak of ropes and the hush of waves, not in triumph, but in release. The hull fades back into a ship, and though silence returns, it no longer feels empty. It feels as though the wood itself carries the memory of words spoken into it, holding them safe in the mast and benches. Around you, breaths deepen, the closeness undeniable, as every man folds into a space no larger than the outline of his cloak. Privacy is gone, yet the night sky spreads wide above, and you feel the slow weight of stars begin to open over the sea. Night steadies itself around the ship, carrying you into hours ruled only by stars. You lie against the hard planks, pressed among bodies that leave little room for stretch or comfort. A knee brushes your ribs, an elbow rests too near your shoulder. The deck beneath is unyielding. Sharp joins in the wood bite no matter how you shift. Some men lean against their shields, others curl tight on cloaks. Historians debate whether hammocks were ever tried, but sagas more often recall sleep snatched on bare planks, cloaks drawn close, a body folded wherever space allowed. The wool you wrap tight scrapes the skin, damp at its edges. Its lanolin scent lingers, sharp and familiar, yet it does little to hide the itch of lice that spread easily in such close quarters. Men sometimes carry combs, passing them quietly from hand to hand, scratching lines against their scalp before easing back into restless stares. These discomforts never vanish. They become part of the night, part of what must be carried like hunger or cold. Each man bears them in silence, because there is no choice otherwise. Yet above all this, the sky spreads vast. Clouds torn loose by the storm draw away until the night reveals its deeper map. Lines of stars stand bright, stitched like threads against black. Some gleam steadily and sharply, others scatter, as faint as dust. You trace the shine of the Milky Way, faintly arching across like pale breath pulled wide across the heavens. And there, strong and constant, the North Star steadies its place. It hangs unmarred by drift, unmoved where the rest turn and slide. Your eyes return to it again and again, finding it almost luminous against the body's weariness. The helmsman's watch never loosens from that same point. His hands press against the long steering oar, his gaze locked northward, as though he reads not a star but a carved mark fixed ahead. Each tilt of the hull corresponds with the line he holds, steering by practice as much as by sight. The North Star holds a special weight in this company, a guide not only for course but for spirit. Even those not at the rudder glance toward it from time to time, their breath easing afterwards, as if reassured that direction still exists in so wide and shapeless a dark. But steering never relies on a single light alone. Navigators folded many signs together. Stories tell that men watched for the way birds wheeled overhead, used the change of cloud colour, followed the lines of swells in water. Islanders knew the song of distant coasts carried differently across waves, and sailors remembered it. At night, the stars gave direction more securely, yet experience wove with memory to complete the path. Scholars remind us that Vikings did not map constellations with charts as we might imagine. Instead, they learned routes by familiarity, the shapes of stars stitched into tales, the habits of weather recalled through practice. This seamanship was trained and inherited, somewhere between instinct and long apprenticeship. The sounds surrounding you keep the night alive. The ship never grows quiet enough to call it silence. Planks creak and protest softly under their load. Ropes tap and snap lightly, smacked by wind or slack water drops. The sea licks at the hull in a steady rhythm, a background sigh never lost, even in a storm. Around you, men breathe in half snores, rasps and murmurs, layered one atop another, until their rhythm takes on its own music. Someone coughs once, muffled, another shifts, cloak rasping against wood like dry leaves. The ship carries these noises through every man's half-sleep, and the pattern itself becomes like rowing by day, constant, anchoring, beyond decision. Still, true sleep resists you. You turn, but wood edges bruise your hip. You toss only to meet another's legs stretched across space. The cloaks are clammy blankets, holding wet close instead of warmth. Memory stirs of straw and smoke, of beds built firm on land, but here there is only plank and sky. The motion never relents either. Longship sways pull you up and drop you down in slow, ceaseless arcs. Rest must surrender to it. You learn night by night that sleep comes not because you seek it, but because at last you cannot resist. You itch again at your throat and scalp, fingertips hunting at small irritations. Beside you, another man lowers his hood and combs fast through his hair, the teeth of bone or horn clicking like a quiet metronome. All understand, all ignore. Lice are not insult at sea, they are company. What matters is that fatigue rises stronger until fingers slow, then drop, leaving the task unfinished, as the sailor's eyes close by sheer demand. Exhaustion outweighs discomfort, as dawn does darkness. Not all voices fall to quiet so quickly. Some men whisper still. Prayers drift like threads. Thor, Odin, Njord, their syllables caught and then snatched away by the open night. Others speak only to the sea itself, as if confiding in a neighbour, listening close at hand. They mutter assurances or thanks, clipped phrases pressed under breath. Alone they might seem empty. Together, woven in the dark, they carry like netting beneath the hull, holding the ship safe in its course. You listen, without intent, yet find lips moving too, your own scraps of words rising simply to ease the silence. Prayer becomes a rhythm as much as a rope or an oar. Stars sharpen as the air clears cold. Now forms show themselves more plainly. A hunter lifts his bow, a serpent winds the wave's edge, a shield broadens its arc. Shapes known by story settle into view overhead. You recall fragments from earlier chanting, heroes set against giants, sagas sung low beneath spoon beats, and feel them mirrored above. It is not imagination. Men told these stories to keep the sky familiar, to stitch the vast night into something named. Up here, worlds are inked by light only, without page or pen. Yet memory makes them steady. The crew lives between wood below and patterned dome above, tightened between planks and stars alike. Time becomes shallow in such hours. Some men sink fast into sleep, heads pressed to bundles of clothes or propped against their shields. Others, like you, drift in half dreams, eyes half shut, then open again at the sudden roll of a wave or the shift of another's bulk, heavy against you without warning. What strikes most is not the strangeness, but the endurance, every night carried like this, day after day, without room, without ease. Still you recall the cycle, the morning's rhythm, stew served at midday, storm endured, tales shared. Routine makes even this possible. Men sleep not for comfort, but because the body folds under its own limits. Above, the star field turns. Slowly, each pattern shifts its place, wheeling over hours, though one always holds. The North Star fixes steady, its calm circle anchoring the rest. That light threads through all men, even as they close worn eyes. The helmsman remains at his post, body firm, patience locked, holding course along that still mark, while every sound around him softens into slow breath. You glance once more and see not only skill, but quiet trust, the assurance that someone keeps watch steady as dawn pulls closer. Eyelids drop and stay closed. Your body bends tighter in a cloak, shoulder pressed against a plank, cheek angled into the warmth of another's back. The smell of wool is sharp but familiar, scratch stinging the chin, yet you no longer lift it away. Fatigue drapes heavier than cold, finally commanding surrender. Prayers blur into a dream, words tangling with visions of sagas retold. In memory's haze, sea serpents swim beside sheepfolds. Gods stand under hearth-fire smoke. Your mind accepts confusion easily, sinking into collapse. Sleep lands not with comfort, but like a weight pressing down. You do not enter it freely. It seizes you when strength expires. With eyes sealed, you drift into rhythm, partnered with the ship itself. Planks creak gently beneath. Waves hush and slap outside. Breath joins the steady chorus around you. Night itself thickens across the vessel, the ceiling of stars glimmering distantly, light enough to mark yet far beyond reach. You remain pressed close to others, space stripped away, but still the demand of rest folds every man. Sleep rules here with certainty, as plain as rowing or eating. Morning sharpens into clarity when a dark line rises steadily on the horizon. A sailor's cry breaks first from the bow, and soon men push past one another to see for themselves. Cloaks flap open, eyes narrow into the dawn. Some murmur, others laugh, but their gaze is fixed on that thin, jagged edge where water ends. Hills, trees, something solid against the endless grey. After so many days adrift, land has shape again. The mood on the ship shifts quickly, though not with shouting or songs. Its change is quieter, like warmth released into long-tired muscles. Shoulders straighten. A few men run rough hands through long beards, tugging loose tangles into shape. Others pull at cloaks, drawing the fabric tighter, adjusting how it hangs. Weapons are checked with firm hands, sword hilts gripped, Shield rims run with a simple tap. It is not vanity, but care. The sea stripped all softness from their appearance, yet in sight of land, every man seeks to stand forward as himself again. Not as a survivor alone, but as someone fit to trade, to speak, to be regarded with respect. As the coast grows near, shapes show more clearly. Cliff ridges lift against the sky, with darker bands of forest drawn into their skirts. Birds wheel above, pale wings stretched wide. The light falls fresh on the stone, gold pressed against damp grey. You lean into the railing and inhale, and there it is, the smell that breaks you open. Earth damp and heavy, rich as wet soil turned fresh by a plough. The men catch it too, noses lifting in unison. Their breaths deepen, ribs pulling wide as though new life fills from the centre lone. After weeks of brine and smoke and sweat, the smell of soil feels impossible. And yet here it is, carried across the bow. Voices break across the deck, full and uneven. Not sagas sung, not chants, just sharp bursts, laughter twisting from strain into brightness. A name is barked, another answers with a shout, pulling gear closer. Oars slam hard into water, but not with grim endurance. This rhythm is sharp, cut quickly with urgency. Each pull drives the ship faster toward the shore. The overseer barely needs command. The men move by hunger alone. The hull lunges forward, as though the wood itself longs for sand. The bow grows crowded, ropes untangled, shields stacked tight, baskets drawn into reach, goods pressed safe in bundles are lifted ready, leather cinched close to keep them dry. Each tool gains meaning again, rope for hauling, axe for lifting timbers, blade not for fighting yet, but for shaping what lies ahead. Every movement sharpens, no strokes idled. The ship becomes preparation, each man bent toward arrival. Land waits, and with it, water to drink, food to gather, soil to claim. The inlet pulls open, shoulders of rock shading a calmer pool of tide. Oars dig their final thrust before the jolt comes, sudden, rough, scraping. The grind of keel on sand and stone, a shiver runs the length of timber, boards moaning like old joints under weight. But then it steadies, stilled by earth. The vessel lies locked after weeks of endless drift. A stillness thicker than silence settles across it, broken a heartbeat later by the storm of men lunging over its sides. Boots slap into shallows, water splashing high. Men stumble quickly, knees near buckling, as solid ground resists their weight. Motion gone, balance must relearn itself. Some crouch, others grip spears to steady their stride. Shouts crack out, mingled with laughter that rises without shame. The wobble is part of the arrival, each stagger a sign of what the sea could not break. You leap down with them, boots snagging deep into wet sand. Soil holds you, firm against tremble, and your chest pounds as if the earth itself pressed life back into muscle. The scent rises sharper here, rich dirt, damp stone, the tang of plant and moss. Some men kneel without thought, dragging black soil into fists. They clutch it tight, smear it across hard palms, crush it into cracked skin. One spits and curses, voice raw from disbelief. Another bows low to press lips into mud. Not in worship, but in raw hunger for earth itself. Someone calls, pointing inland to the trickle of water feathering down rock. Your legs sway even as they drive forward, racing toward the source. At the stream's edge, men drop to their knees, pushing faces into running water. Cupped hands dart quickly, lifting them hard and fast to mouths. The gulps thunder, wrung from throats that had long sung hoarsely for salt alone. It runs clean, fresh, sweeter than any feast. It cuts the tongue alive. You kneel and drink too, lips split wide, letting the current wash away more than thirst. Cold floods deep into the chest and belly, spreading as though the body itself reclaims its strength. Around you laughter stumbles into silence, broken by the low sound of sighing, a release so profound it echoes across the cove. Still, caution presses through. Eagerness fades into glances sharp to the tree line, hands pulling weapons closer. The sagas made it clear, land does not always greet you as a friend. Markets could open into exchanges of silver and grain, furs passed warm from one hand to another, but land could close just as fast, answering strides with spears aimed from shadows. The crew senses both truths. Even in joy, eyes cut across ridges, watching for what moves. Relief breathes close with fear, joined like an oar stroke to a tide. Some kneel again to mark the moment, a bead pressed into mud, a strip of wood pushed upright in wet sand. Whispers lift toward gods, low, private, yet heavy with gratitude. The sea has not killed, the storm did not break them, and for this, earth must hear its thanks. Ritual takes form, not with grandeur, but with spit cast into soil, words pressed soft into morning air. It is habit and hope, folded together, anchoring first steps on ground as firmly as prayer once anchored them at sea. Soon work stirs again. Cargo slides down, bundles pressed into the earth, baskets left open for what forage might give. Tools lifted, axe, hammer, blade, each ready not for glory, but survival. By habit, men spread, assessing coast and growth. Eyes tilt both outward and inward. Trade waits beyond here, furs carried to exchange, pale amber glinting in bags, even a sprig of dried fruit pressed into a pack. Each item meant to open new doors, to draw silver and grain in return. The sagas hinted often at this. Voyages turned not to conquest alone, but to exchanges stitched quietly across lands. Here, with shore steady underfoot, you smell possibility as clearly as earth in your palm. You turn once looking at the ship. Its frame lolls eased, hull half buried into the beach. Timbers stretch and creak softly, as if unbound at last from restless water. It no longer lies taut with strain. Instead, you see it as a tired friend. Resting heavy upon soil, it has longed for as deeply as those it bore. Men scatter outward to tasks, but you pause, hand lifted and pressed against its side. The planks are cold, wet, scraped raw, but steady. The gesture carries memory of all it bore. Storm, hunger, rhythm, silence. It too has reached land. The steadiness under you feels unfamiliar still. Your legs continue to tremble slightly, uncertain how to trust the ground that does not shift. Yet balance returns one breath at a time. Hunger stirs in the belly. Body aches remain, but a calm settles deeper. This moment is not wrapped in song or triumph. It arrives quietly, yet with more weight than any glory. Your hand sets deep into cool soil by your boot. Fingers curl, black grit clinging under nails. Tight in your palm, land proves itself real. The sea lies only steps behind, its horizon unbroken, but now distant. Men still cough against brine lodged in their throats. Cloaks hang dark, still heavy with salt, but already they bend into tasks of survival. Laughter rising in scattered bursts mixed with measured watchfulness. The moment does not erase hardship, nor promise safety beyond what the day can keep. What it offers is smaller, firmer, the earth beneath you, the scent of it filling your lungs after weeks of water. That is enough. Your body eases for the first time in many days. Each sound, clatter of blades, soft speech among men, the trickle of running stream, settles the air around you. The day stretches open with task and uncertainty. Yet for these breaths, you stand rooted. The soil grips you tight, and with it comes a steady thought that this is what all the rowing and waiting has earned. From here, new burdens will rise, but for now, the planks and waves belong behind. You press your palm once more into the black soil, letting it cling cool against your hand. It will stay there a little longer, carried with you. The sea's rhythms remain inside, but here the ground anchors them into something steady, something still. In this pause you feel not triumph, but the quiet balance of arrival, holding you firm before the long wait of life resumes. A day on the Longship is not marked by heroes or grand tales. It is long hours of rowing, salt on your lips, and hands rubbed raw against heavy wood. It is thin broth passed carefully from one man to the next, laughter rising softly in the middle of fatigue, and charms pressed to rope for courage when storms turn the sea wild. Warmth survives in cloaks, in shoulders pressed close, in the low weight of songs that echo across planks until silence feels easier. These small rhythms, shared work, shared faith, shared rest, become the heartbeat that carries life forward. They form the bond that turns endurance into something more than survival. Each quiet act a thread holding the ship together. If this calm journey was a comfort to you tonight, you're welcome to return. Consider subscribing, and we can drift once more to other days long past.